History often teaches us a simple rule. Bigger armies win. More soldiers mean more strength, more pressure, and more certainty of victory. For centuries, commanders trusted sheer force to decide battles, believing that numbers alone could crush resistance. But sometimes history breaks that rule.
Distant,
This is the story of a
unintelligible
battle where
shouting
discipline defeated sheer
war
force.
cries.
From the very beginning,
They're attempting
the
a
imbalance
flanking
was
maneuver on the
obvious.
West Ridge.
One side arrived with overwhelming numbers.
Hold positions.
Their army was loud, confident, and aggressive. Thousands moved together, convinced that their size alone would bring victory. They had come to overpower, not to adapt.
Charge!
Facing
Don't
them
stop!
was a much smaller force. Fewer soldiers, fewer resources, no advantage in numbers. But what they lacked in size, they made up for in control. They stood quietly, perfectly aligned, waiting with calm precision. The difference between the two sides was not strength, it was discipline. As the larger army advanced, noise filled the battlefield. Shouts echoed, dust rose into the air. Formations stretched and bent as soldiers rushed forward, eager to strike first. Speed replaced coordination, aggression replaced control. The disciplined force did not move. They waited, shields locked, lines tight. Every soldier knew their position and trusted the one beside them. They did not react to noise or pressure. They reacted only to command. When the clash finally came, it shocked everyone. The massive charge stopped. Sheer force crashed into a wall of order. The disciplined formation absorbed the impact and held firm. What was meant to be an unstoppable wave became a stalled mass, compressed and confused. The larger army tried again, and again. Each time, brute force met control. Disorder met precision. Soldiers pushed forward, but there was nowhere to go. Their numbers worked against them, piling pressure from behind while the front could not move. Time passed, and fatigue set in. The larger army burned energy quickly, shouting, pushing, charging. Each failed attempt drained strength and morale. Meanwhile, the disciplined force rotated positions smoothly. Tired soldiers stepped back, fresh ones stepped forward. The line never broke. This battle was no longer about strength. It was about endurance and control. Confusion spread through the larger army. Orders became harder to follow. Units attacked without support. Momentum vanished. Soldiers began to hesitate, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Hesitation is deadly. The disciplined force sensed the shift. They did not rush recklessly. They applied pressure carefully. Short, precise movements. Perfect timing. Just enough force to destabilize an already disorganized enemy. Sheer force began to crumble. What once looked unstoppable now looked fragile. The larger army's confidence faded. Doubt replaced certainty. The realization spread that size alone could not break discipline. Eventually, the inevitable happened. The larger army began to pull back. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Slowly, reluctantly. Soldiers looked over their shoulders. Formations loosened. Retreat replaced attack. The disciplined force held position. They did not chase blindly. They did not celebrate too early. Control had carried them this far, and control would finish the battle. When the larger army finally withdrew, the battlefield fell silent. The smaller force still stood. They had not won by overwhelming their enemy. They had not relied on numbers or aggression. They had won by remaining calm when chaos ruled the field. News of the battle spread quickly. Commanders studied it carefully. The lesson was impossible to ignore. Discipline multiplies strength, order defeats chaos, control outlasts force. This battle became a reminder written into history that power without discipline is fragile, that sheer force collapses when coordination fails, and that the most dangerous army is not always the largest, but the most controlled. The soldiers who stood that day did not defeat sheer force with violence. They defeated it with discipline, and that is why this battle is remembered, because it proved that when discipline holds, even the strongest force can fall. History has always favored power. Larger armies, louder charges, overwhelming numbers. For centuries, commanders believed that force alone could decide battles. The logic was simple. More soldiers meant more pressure, more momentum, and more certainty of victory. And most of the time that logic worked, but not always. Sometimes history delivers a lesson that defies expectation. This is the story of when discipline beat sheer force. From the very beginning, the imbalance was obvious. One army arrived in massive numbers. Their ranks stretched across the land, banners filling the horizon, voices echoing with confidence. They believed their strength alone would crush resistance. Speed and aggression were their weapons, and they trusted both completely. Facing them was a smaller force, quiet, controlled, perfectly aligned. They lacked numbers, but not purpose. Every soldier knew his position. Every movement had been practiced. They did not shout. They did not rush. They waited. The difference between the two armies was not courage. It was control. As the larger army advanced, the battlefield filled with noise. Dust rose into the air. Orders overlapped. Units pushed forward without coordination, eager to strike first. Formation bent and stretched as momentum replaced discipline. Power surged forward, but control began to fade. The smaller force remained still, shields locked, lines tight, breathing steady. They understood that reacting too early would be fatal. Discipline demanded patience, and patience was something sheer force did not possess. When the clash finally came, it did not unfold as expected. The massive charge stopped. Sheer force collided with order and lost its momentum. The disciplined formation absorbed the impact, holding firm as chaos piled against it. Soldiers at the front were crushed by pressure from behind, unable to move forward or retreat. Numbers, once an advantage, became a burden. The larger army regrouped and attacked again, and again. Each time aggression met precision. Disorder met coordination. The attacks grew louder but less effective. Energy drained quickly. Shouting replaced strategy. Strength was spent without progress. Meanwhile, the disciplined force moved like a single body. Tired soldiers rotated back. Fresh ones stepped forward. Shields were raised and lowered in unison. Every movement was deliberate. Nothing was wasted. This battle was no longer about strength. It was about endurance. As time passed, cracks began to form in the larger army. Orders became harder to follow. Units attacked without support. Gaps opened. Confidence slowly eroded. Soldiers who once charged forward now hesitated, unsure of what awaited them at the line. Hesitation spread, and hesitation is deadly. The disciplined force sensed the change immediately. They did not rush recklessly. They applied pressure carefully, striking only where control could be maintained. Short advances, perfect timing, then stillness again. Each movement increased confusion among the attackers. Sheer force began to collapse under its own weight. What had once appeared unstoppable now looked fragile. The larger army struggled to coordinate, struggling even to retreat in an orderly way. Confidence faded. Doubt replaced certainty. The realization spread that numbers alone could not break discipline. Eventually, the inevitable happened. The larger army began to pull back, not all at once, not dramatically, slowly, reluctantly. Soldiers glanced over their shoulders, formations loosened, momentum vanished completely. What had begun as an overwhelming assault ended as a cautious withdrawal. The disciplined force held position. They did not chase blindly. Control had carried them this far, and control would finish the battle. When the larger army finally retreated, the battlefield fell silent. The smaller force still stood. There was no celebration, no cries of victory, only steady breathing and lowered shields. They had not won through brute strength. They had not relied on numbers or fury. They had relied on order when chaos ruled the field. News of the battle spread quickly. Commanders studied it carefully. Chroniclers struggled to explain it. How could such power fail? How could such discipline endure? The answer was uncomfortable but clear. Power without control is fragile. Aggression without coordination collapses. Discipline multiplies strength beyond numbers. This battle became more than a military encounter. It became a lesson written into history, a reminder that force alone is never enough, that armies do not break only from losses, but from confusion, exhaustion, and loss of control. Those who stood that day did not defeat sheer force with greater violence. They defeated it with patience, unity, and discipline. And that is why this battle is remembered, because it proved that when order holds firm, even the strongest force can fall.